and welcome, I'm Raziel, and today I want to talk about supplementary books. You know, the books that you buy to boost your game. These can be anything from army books to campaign books, well, to pretty much anything really. And I have a fair collection. I have battle tomes, I have army books, I have Imperial Armor books, all the way back from 2nd edition. Well, not Imperial Armor books, but courtesies from and Warhammer Fantasy Battle books from 2nd edition and 3rd edition. And yeah, so I thought, what would make a good one and what makes a bad one? So there's pretty much a lot of things, but I think are some very surefire things to tell the difference between a good one and a bad one. See, a good one, which I could call off the top of my head, is the 8th edition Craft World Aldari book. That is a very good book. It has lore reveals. It has a nice setup of pages. It's nicely laid out. Everything's easily to cut by, and you know, it's interesting to read. It's actually good to read. The Harlequin one as well is another book which I find incredibly fascinating to read. And yes, I do read these books from cover to cover. So that is what, like I said, those are good books, and the reason they are good is because of the way they're laid out. Now, a bad book is, first things first, will have you needing to buy something on top. To me, the Chaos Space Marine one from 9th edition is considered a bad one for that reason. If you wish to use Death Guard, Thousand Sons, or Khorne Berserkers, which were absolutely available in 8th edition, so it cannot be even using the fact that, you know, the Death Guard and Thousand Sons had codices back then. But if you wanted to use those cult ones in your army, you had to buy the codex to go with it. And that's the other thing, it is a codex, not a supplement, so you would be paying. So just to use one unit of Death Guard in your your Iron Warriors, you'd have to pay an extra 30 odd quid just to use them, which is incredibly bad. I don't like that, and it isn't right. Like I said again, especially when they were available prior. So, and the other thing is, what makes a good one, is how much you have to keep flipping between pages. How many rules you have to learn to do this, which it becomes an awful chore within a game. So let's say that I did Iron Warriors back in the 9th edition, which means I had to read the 9th Iron Warriors book, and I needed to have that marked with the rest of them. So double checking myself would mean I'd have to constantly go back and forth within the two rules, which makes the game long. And now if I was to use my Thousand Sons or, you know, Death Guard, yeah, that would mean I would have to have 2 books or 3 books open just to use this one army book. Again, this is a lot of time and a lot of boredom. And finally, and this was actually prevalent with all of 9th edition, was the lack of lore. There was so little lore, and it was quite dull. It wasn't even technically dull. Well, I meant it was not technical stuff, which most people, I don't know if most people find that dull. I know I don't. I find it highly interesting. I think this is one of the reasons I love the Tyrannus books, because they're very technical. All of them are. They're very technical books. They're very much written as reports on how it is, and I love that. That to me is absolutely fantastic. That's one reason I like Nid Codexes, because they do have this very much officialdom to them. You know, they are written as a report, not just as stories. But the older ones are very much written as stories. Again, it's pretty good. And again, the Chaos didn't do much. It didn't add much to the lore, and that was it. In 8th edition Craft Worlds, it added quite a bit, including a bit which means that guy, Drew Kari guy with blades, he might not be the first Phoenix Lord of the Striking Scorpions, because late within the timeline of the Striking Scorpions, Karandras actually fought Achras in a battle and won. So there's a good that, you know, that dude will not be them because he can't be in 2 places at once. And I like it when a book has lore reveals. And again, if we go to the Eldar book, there was a lot of lore in there. Each unit had a full page to itself, which is absolutely fantastic. It's really in-depth in how things worked and what they did, and it was told in a story, like the Eldar would. And again, these books also kind of have to reflect what the army is as well. Like an Imperial Guard book should be very militaristically written, very much official, and Not that the Eldar should be very much a story. That's how they would work and how they are. And again, Tyrannus don't really work that way, so again, a report and stuff like that would be fantastic as well. And we see this sort of thing back in the 3rd edition codices. Well, they weren't my favourite. They were good codices for the game because, again, they were very well laid out, but they very much lacked lore. They were, which I didn't like at the time, but I've grown into enjoying. But because, again, they were very much beautifully written. The Orc one was very much written like all the lore, and everything was written like an Orc. They were written that way. And you can imagine Orc telling these stories. It was fun, it was interesting. It wasn't much, but that was made it good. And to reflect this side, the Eldar was the same. That was another one I got. And to further reflect is when we went on to 4th edition, where you had the blue border, which I think might have been 4th or 5th edition. You kind of had a more bland looking. They were just, printed on paper, obviously. Like, it was just basic flat, where 3rd edition was very much designed around the theme of the army. The Orcs had all their glyphs and their tribality throughout. And then the Eldar also had all the curves and the shapes and the wraithbone, and looked fantastic. And then the next one, you basically just got a very grey pitch glyph behind it, and that was it. And that's kind of let them down, but you did get more lore, which is, to me, made it a better one. And the rules, I found them quite easy to find. I know a lot of people didn't, and they didn't like it, but I actually found them quite easy to find back then. I didn't have an issue. But later on, like in 9th edition, I found them a lot harder to use. Especially when the Eldar one came on out, that became really bad, because rather than having the Harlequins and everything in their respective troops, HQ, etc., it was separated as a separate army. Now, that's not a bad thing, because you could use Harlequins as a separate army. That's fine, that's absolutely okay. But it also meant if you were using Harlequins in your Eldar army as normal, you did have to flip between the 2 different army pages. It's not as bad as the Chaos Spaceman one, don't get me wrong, but it was a pain in the arse, and it was bad for bad editing in one way. Now, what actually made me think about this video and what got me started it actually was the Liber books for Horus Heresy. And to me, these aren't very good books. I've got them all now, and let me explain why. Well, first things first, you have very little lore, which is quite a shock. I think, personally, I might be wrong, but there's probably more lore for each legion in the Age of Darkness rulebook than there is in the Legion's Liber Astartes or Liber Heretics. I think there is actually more, which is actually absolutely shocking. You would think the books that are dedicated to the legions or the other armies, they would contain more lore, which is, like I said, it's absolutely shocking. And then if you were to use them, there is a lot of flicking back and forth, because I would have put the Legion special rules nearer the front, not at the back, and had everything like the normal everyday stuff right at the back. So you would be able to, while there would be a lot of flicking back and forth, you would always be open to the Legion. You'd open to your Legion first, and then everyone else, rather than open to everyone else and then having to go to your Legion, because your Legion special rules should have been coming first. Those are the ones you would use more often, because they would affect the entire army, rather than having the entire army first, then the rules afterwards, such as the reactions for the Space Marines, for the Blood Angels or the Dark Angels, and you would want to know that first before you open the rest of the book, because that's what's important. I wouldn't say they had to put, the actual special units, the unique units within the actual, like, the elites within the elites of the army. I don't think they should have done that. That's just wrong. But they should have had the legions at the front. And I think they kind of learnt this lesson in the later books, because the Custodes in Liber Imperium was right at the start with the Sisters of Silence, and each one was very much dedicated, having Their main falls at the start and then everything afterwards. And then again with Mechanicum as well. So it looked like they actually learnt their lesson afterwards. It's a shame that they didn't do it with the two main forces. So yeah, so I'm not a big fan of it. And again, the amount of lore is quite low, and I don't like it. But they do have a lot of pictures which are very technical. Well, technical for 40k and Horus Heresy at least, which pretty cool. Which I like, seeing the heraldry and what it means, and seeing the vehicles and diagrams of those, even though they're very much coloured and not too technical. I'd rather they be more technical, because that would have been really cool to see how a last cannon works and stuff like that within the lore. That would be cool, but it's not. It's very much more technical than it is in the 40k books. Now we go to now we go to fantasy. We see more of this as well. Second edition fantasy books, well, third edition to say, if we came out with second edition of 40k, were very much story written. Again, it was to suit the fantasy bit. Either Dark Elf 1 is one of my favourites, and it was written again pretty much as a story, and it was interesting to read. My favourites were this of a Skaven, because there's lots of interesting lore as well. Now, one thing that makes a bad one, and this really has happened a lot, is when nothing is new. And I'm not talking new old units. It's even when the lore attached to the unit is identical to previous editions. And this happens a lot. I noticed this back in 7th edition when I was looking through the 5th edition of the Space Marine book. It must have been 7th or 6th. And basically, it was word for word perfect on the lore. Absolutely perfect. It was no difference. There was a copy and paste of it. There was no new lore. And that irks me, because that's a bad thing. There's no new lore. You want new lore. You want that sort of stuff, because that's cool. Anyway, here's what I think about new codex supplements and extra. What makes a good one, what makes a bad one. I hope you all have a great day. I hope you have a great time. And I'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on the next video. And I love you guys. Link to Wayland Games down below, as always, if you wish to save money on your Warhammer or try a different game, as I always suggest. There is comics, merchandise, and as well down below. That's all made by me, and there is Forbidden Planet if you like comics, and of course Patreon if you want to give me money. But as always, treat yourself first rather than just giving me money. And have a great day. Bye bye.